Here's the question. I want to connect more deeply with my partner. We both do. We are both very independent people who have active individual careers that don't often intersect and lives. The advice from our therapist was that we need to communicate more. He told us that we need to debrief our day together and share more. Okay, so since I was given that advice, we've tried. But honestly, it's not going so great, and it doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere differently. Can you offer some help to help me understand how we can better debrief our day and communicate? Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you for your honesty. That's helpful when someone's honest and vulnerable, as we talked about in the last question, that I can help you address the issue. So let's talk about these practical tools on how to create or engage with this daily debrief and why this seems to not be working for you. So, okay, so like when I read this question, there's a big clue that comes out immediately in the question, which I feel like is a key for you to understand as to why this is not going deeper and why you guys aren't getting somewhere in this thing that you're doing. So I want to address the word debrief because it's an interesting choice of wording, and I think it kind of says a lot about what's going on. So let's be clear, first of all, what debrief means. Okay, when you use the word debrief, it implies an account of the day, a data exchange, utilitarian. It's a utilitarian function, right? It's a story, it's a narrative. It's actually defined as a series of questions about a completed mission or undertaking or an interrogation to obtain information. Okay, so first of all, I think the word debrief implies something more or different than what you're actually looking for, and that actually might be part of the problem. So when we use the word debrief, that's superficial. That's a data exchange between two people. I do that in a meeting. I debrief my partner on the stats of the company. I debrief, circumstances, data exchange. This is devoid of emotional connection when we talk about debriefing. And I think maybe the help of changing the wording might effectively give you a different way. So if you're looking for connection, if you're looking for deeper intimacy, if you're looking for something deeper, debriefing is not going to get you there, right? It is a starting point. Debriefing is a starting point, but it's not going to get you to where you want to go if you stay in data exchange. If you stay in the mentalized conceptual world of utilitarian functioning, that's not going to get you to deeper connection. Like that's two robots, exchanging information. It's not that it's not important, but it's not the whole story. So first of all, let's take the word debrief out of this and let's change it to maybe like a connection check-in. Okay? So I agree with your therapist that it's important that you need to communicate more and you need to create opportunities each day, especially if you're independent people and you have independent businesses and you function independently from each other, that you need to make these connection points through the course of the day with your partner, right? And at least once a day, but like legitimately probably more than that if it's possible. But at the very least, at one point, there should be once a day. And if you're independent people and you have independent lives and you're highly engaged in those lives, these worlds may not connect at all until you intentionally make an opportunity to create a connection for the course of the day, a connection point. So, okay, you're doing that. You're getting together with your partner at the end of the day and you're like, great, we're going to debrief. Let me tell you what my day was like. You tell me what your day was like. But that's it. When you talk about debriefing, you're talking about once the data is shared, the story is expressed, once you've, given an account of the day and you've exchanged all the narrative, there's a lot more to be engaged here. And so I want to kind of give you a practical application of this idea of using those 4 tools of vulnerability, understanding, healthy connection and communication, and consistency. And I want to give you the practical application of how to do that in a connection check-in with your partner. Okay? So here's what I would recommend. Since the debriefing isn't working, let me lay out an actual way for you to do this, and a practical way for you to do this, and play with this and see if this makes a difference. Okay, so here's the first thing. When you check in with your partner. You have this connection point of your partner, and you've both decided you're going to take intentional time. You're going to make an intentional effort to sit together and do this. First of all, let's do it this way. One person talks and one person holds space, right? Do it that way. First and foremost, let one person hold space, one person be fully available, and let the other person unload, talk, share, give a narrative, right? And so now here's, what do you do when you get into this connection check-in? What are the mechanics of it? So first, if somebody's holding space and one individual's holding space and the individual is talking, you need to understand what holding space means. You are available and you're listening, you're taking it in, you're not necessarily offering advice, you're not offering a way to fix it, you're not offering a way to change it. And if you wanna offer something, you ask, hey, can I offer something about that? Or are you finished? I have something I want to share about that. And you ask the individual, are you willing? Are you interested in hearing and seeing my perspective on it? Right? So the first part of this check-in, this connection check-in, is just one person holding space and one person talking. Right there, you create this feeling of being heard, completely available. There's an intimacy. There's an opportunity for connection when you're being with somebody and you're giving them the opportunity to run through their process. Legitimately, this can be for partners, but this is also for kids. When my daughter comes home from school, I hold space and I go, hey, honey, how was your day? And she gives the narrative of all of the things that happened as a 17-year-old that happened to her through the day, and I hold space. I make myself available and take in what she's saying, right? Partners can do this. Friends can do this. Listen, the art of holding space, yeah, it's not that developed in most people. Most people are waiting to talk. They're not taking in what people are saying and holding space and really taking it in and being an available, present human being. So that first is key. If you want to make a connection check-in, you want to hold space for your partner, for the individual you are checking in with. It shows you care. And you're not fixing, changing, shifting, making anything different at that point. You're just being available to listen. It's a skill. And it's important. It makes a huge difference. Just being with someone and being available makes a very big difference in feeling loved, understood, supported, seen, acknowledged. So be clear on that, okay? So first part, you hold space, one person talks, one person holds space. Then you debrief. You let the person debrief. They tell the story about their day, the crazy stuff that happened, the narrative, the account, the data, right? You go through all that. Let them have that. Let them spin that out. Then we talk about taking the next step, and the next step is the theme, the dynamics. I noticed this pattern when I was exploring this today. I noticed this coming up in me. So there's a whole, we take the discussion from the superficial narrative and we drop it into awareness, into the dynamics. Now we're talking about the dynamics of what happened during the day. Wow, I noticed a lot of anger around me. It was interesting. This person seemed to be blah, blah, blah. I seemed to be this way. I noticed that I was I was really activated quite a bit today by this individual. Now you're talking about dynamics. Right? You're now engaging something more than just a narrative. In fact, listen, let's be clear. The narrative only exists to get you to the dynamics. The narrative is the pointer. That's the narrative. That actually shows you what is going on. If you want to have a real discussion that goes deeper, you got to talk dynamics, not narrative. Narrative gets you to the dynamics, but the dynamics are key. Right? So, let the person continue to talk through those dynamics. They may talk to you and through them. They're kind of working through those dynamics, but you're still holding space, right? And then the next question you ask, and some of you may recognize this question because it's the same question in inner child writing that you ask when you're doing reparenting your own inner child. You ask, how do you feel about what happened to you today? I do the same thing with my daughter. I hold space. I let her go through. I'm like, oh, she talks about the dynamics. This person did this. It was interesting, blah, 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 blah. I let her go through it. And then I talk to her and I say, how do you feel about what you experienced, the dynamics, the theme, the different things that happened to you today? And you give them the opportunity to share their feelings, right? You listen. You're still holding space. You may say, hey, can I invite something? I have a perception about that, or I have an interesting idea about that. Are you interested in hearing it? You ask if you want to be invited into the conversation, right? And then when they're done sharing their feelings, the last question you ask is, what do you need? Right? Now, let's be clear. When I say to you, ask the question, what do you need? That does not mean you're trying to solve their problem and give them what they need. It just means they're acknowledging what they need. So you may or may not be the one to fulfill that need. You're not obligated, and there's no pressure or responsibility. You're just inviting them to share their needs. Now we're talking about a connection. Well, if that's all going on and I'm holding space, first, I get the account of the day. Second, I get the dynamics based on the level of awareness of that individual and the dynamics that they observe. Third, I invite them into asking how they feel. What was your direct experience of what happened to you today? Now we're going deeper into consciousness, right? And the last question is, what do you need? Once you get to that point, you are in a very different conversation than just a debriefing about the account of the day. So once you've done that with your partner, you switch. Now the other partner holds space, and you do it. The other person who was speaking now holds space for you. You debrief, you share your patterns and dynamics. They ask you, how do you feel about what happened to you today? And finally, what do you need? Knowing that they may not be able to be the one who offers that, but they're offering the individual to speak it aloud so that that person can actually acknowledge what their needs are. So I do this for my daughter when she comes home from school. I let her debrief. I ask her about the patterns and the dynamics. We go to the depth that she's able to go to or willing to go to. Then I ask her how she feels about what happened. If she says something, I encourage those feelings. Oh, you felt that? Well, that's interesting. Why did you feel that? So if you are going to engage in the holding space place, you're engaging from asking questions for clarity, not to fix. You're just there being with the individual. You're connecting with them. And then the last thing I ask her, what do you need? Like, what do you need, honey? Based on all the things that you told me, what do you need? Sometimes she says, I just need a hug. Or she'll say, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like, what I need right now is like to nap. Or she'll say, I just need Jack to hear me when I tell him that I don't want to go out with him. Or whatever it is, right? I'm not going to be able to fix the situation, but I can be with her while she's going through the process of unraveling. From the superficial to the data, to the dynamics, from the dynamics to the emotions, the direct experience, from the direct experience to asking her what she needs. And oftentimes I ask her what she needs and she will say, I'm going to go do that for myself. In other words, I have just invited that individual to reparent themselves. And I didn't have to do anything except make a conscious connection check-in and follow those steps. And then switch. She says to me, how was your day? And I tell her. And then we go as deep as I want to go into the dynamics based on who I'm talking to and what's discerning. Then we talk about how I felt about it. And then I tell her what I need. Or she asks me. This I would suggest for partners, for romantic partners, for friends, for parents. This works. And you know why it works? Because it's based on the exact same tool of inner child writing when you reparent your own inner child. So when you ask yourself, when you go inside and you journal and you're doing, this is exactly how you journal. You tell the story about what happened through the day. You write all the things that happened. You break down the dynamics of what happened. You talk about the feelings of those dynamics. And then you ask your inner child, what do you need? Now, look at the difference between that and debriefing, right? We're way beyond data exchange at this point. We're way beyond utilitarian functioning. We're way beyond just the narrative for the sake of the narrative. And let's be clear, people spin in that narrative. Folks, I can't stress this enough. The magic's in the dynamics, not in the story. The story is only a vehicle to get you in deeper. So, if you want to have a connection, check in with your partner. Make this as a skill. This is the practical way to do it. Hold space, boom. 4 steps. Debrief, dynamics and issues, patterns that you've noticed, experiences that you're having, emotions, your direct experience of that, and then what do you feel and what do you need? And at that point, tell me that you're not going to create a deepening or a more intimate connection with your partner or your child or your friend, right? And then you apply vulnerability, understanding, healthy communication, right? Open and honest, grounded in maturity. You apply consistency. If you do this every day, you're going to create connection. It'll go deeper. And if you're looking for more depth and you're looking to go somewhere deeper, you got to do something different. So debriefing, important, top of the ladder. Superficial. So I invite you all to consider with your partners, your friends, your children, your colleagues, those people who you care to create a deeper connection with, are you doing this? And even more importantly, if you want to learn to develop this with others, do it with yourself. This is how you journal. This is one of the most powerful journaling exercises available to you. Story, dynamics, emotions. How do you feel? What's your direct experience? What do you need? I can promise you, you will feel heard. You will feel valued. You will feel understood. You will feel like people are willing and interested if you make the time to do this. Now, once a day, sure, but you could do this multiple times a day. If you do it, the more often you do it, the more consistency there is with this exercise, the more trust gets developed, the quicker you get there. For those of you who've been in partnerships for a long time, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like you have that consistency, so that consistency, like it's effortless to go there with your partner because you've developed that consistency of connection, touch point. And because of that, there's trust, there's safety, there's a willingness. It's easier to crack the shell and share. So as a practical way of making a connection, a check-in connection, try those 4 steps. But remember, it only works if you're willing to hold space for the other person. If you can't hold space and you're going to interrupt, interject, in other words, if you can't have mature conversation and communication with your partner or your child or your friend, it's not going to make much difference. Interrupting them doesn't make them feel heard, loved, adored. So you make that agreement with your partner. Here's the game. Here's how we're going to play it. And if you really need to, use a talking stick. The person who's talking holds the stick and you do not let the other person does not talk unless they're asking questions for clarity until they get the stick themselves. I'm telling you, this is exactly how my wife and I communicate. Every day, multiple times a day. Check-in points. How do you feel? First of all, what's going on? What are the dynamics of what's going on? How do you feel about those dynamics? How you feel in general about what you're doing? What's your day going on? How you feel? What's your direct experience of what's happening? And then the question is, what do you need? Remember, you're not obligated to give them what you need. You're just offering that. You may be the one who can give it to them. You may be able to give them a hug. Or you know what? Maybe you just gave them what you need because you listened. Practical way of looking at it. Right? So let's take a look at the chat and see what we've got going on here. Because there's a bunch of stuff going on. All right, so the chat. For me, it's mostly about active listening without judgment, holding space. So you don't have a pre-designed answer. Right, there's no agenda in holding space. And that's like a great interviewer. Exactly. For those of you who do market research, who are interviewers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a space where there's no agenda. You're just being with the individual. You're not reacting emotionally to what's going on, and you're just available. It's the available adult. If you want to know the mature element of this, this is the available adult that runs this particular exercise. You don't react emotionally. to what they're saying, and you keep their answers separate. You don't take it personally. That's all about being the available adult. And you can explore what each person is thinking and feeling. It's a form of deep, intimate, but impersonal talking. And yes, it's counterintuitive, but it's about asking questions. When you're in that available adult and you're holding space, you're asking questions for clarity, for exploration purposes. There's no agenda, right? So that, in a sense, it's not necessarily counterintuitive if you know what position you're playing in this particular exercise. And what Markus teaches on holding space for yourself is really important, because once you can do it inwardly, it becomes much easier to do it with others. Exactly. So you practice this, if you practice this with yourself, the mature adult with your wounded inner child, you will have the skills internally built to naturally be able to do it with another individual. Very powerful. Okay? So this is the practical application of what we talked about prior. Thank you so much for that. That's an incredibly good question. I appreciated it, and hopefully that's helpful. So I want you to practice this. Practice this holding space internally if you're going to journal with yourself, if you're living alone or you're doing this as a process internally, and even if you're another partner, you still want to learn to do this. And then as you do this with yourself, practice it with others. All right? And then play with and see if it goes to different places. See, the key, the proof is in the pudding. So the deal here is you want to play with this. Don't take my word for it. Just take the exercise and try it and see what it does. See if it takes you to a different place with an individual. With yourself and your own inner engagement with your fragments, your fragmentation, your personality, your own mature inner adult with your own inner child. And does it also take you to a different place with your connections with individuals in the outside world?